Hi everyone, my name is Steph Hanlon and I am a lecturer in Politics and Society, and I'm the Programme Director of the Higher Diploma in Politics and Society here at Carlow College St. Patrick's. So I'm here to talk to you as part of our lecture series for Leaving Cert students, and specifically I'm focusing on the Politics and Society syllabus, particularly looking at misinformation and fake news and how we can address that through one of the learning strands in the context of the curriculum. So first things first, I'm going to be touching on the learning strand, active citizenship. And the particular focus that I want to give to this is on seeking and evaluating information and ideas within the politics and society syllabus. So active citizenship is one of our 4 key learning strands. So we have power and decision making first, we have active citizenship, human rights and responsibilities, and globalization and localization. So this is where we factor in. Active citizenship focuses on a broad range of areas, and there's a lot of potential to tie that in when you're talking about different topics, either in the context of your discursive essay or your data-based questions, as well as your reflection as part of your citizenship project. So so in this context, misinformation and fake news has been on our agenda politically, on our agenda in terms of research and academia, hugely, but it's also very important for understanding contemporary political changes at the moment. So we're living through it. It's very, very, it's very, very contested terrain, but therefore there's a lot for us to focus on and to write about, with plenty of different examples. So just on section 4.4 of topic 4, so rights and responsibilities in communication with others, seeking and evaluating information and ideas is broken down to 6 areas. So out of this, when we're looking at information received from traditional media, news media, and directly from other people in a reasoned way, out of these 6 areas, I'm going to be looking at 3 of those. Okay, so out of those 3, we are going to be looking at understanding the difference between opinion, reason, judgment, and fact, ways to judge the credibility of an information source using criteria such as authorship, currency, and potential bias. And lastly, it is very important for us to recognize the components of an argument. So, for example, the assumptions, the reasons, and the counter arguments and conclusions that may be made throughout that. So, fake news and misinformation, as I mentioned, it's very relevant. It's one of the most newsworthy political and social issues is news itself at the moment, or rather fake news. A growing line of research is emerging in the political and social sciences disciplines that various dimensions of fake news, including consumption, the patterns behind fake news, diffusion, how it is, how it is circulated and diffused, the impact of fake news, and then, of course, the different ways that we can go about debunking fake news. However, we're still trying to answer the question, and there are so many definitions and answers to what is fake news and what are different types of fake news, and why or how is it that it spreads so very quickly. Because fake news makes up just one component of a shift in the political landscape, and that shift has been conceptualized as in the context of post-truth politics. So post-truth politics, that refers to a political culture where emotional appeals and personal beliefs have more influence on public opinion rather than objective facts. So political misdirection, it's very important for us to be aware of this. Political misdirection and propaganda have occurred for centuries, and they can be traced back to ancient Greece. So on his work on sophistical refutations, Aristotle discussed the use of the red herring fallacies to dodge and to deflect an opponent's arguments. However, before the 2016 US presidential election, most people had never heard of the phrase fake news. The idea of fake news has gained recent currency mainly because of its use as a rhetorical strategy by now again President Donald Trump, and it's very contemporary but also convenient use to dismiss an opponent's claim. So claiming something as fake news. Okay, as well as the spread and propagation of fake news in itself. So what we see here is the use of fake news for two different reasons. So fake news is applied to, a wide range of activities and issues. So everything from fabricating content, manipulating content, electoral misinformation, to advertising, fake and hoax websites, deepfakes, so AI manipulated videos and images, propaganda, conspiracy theories, news satire, and so on. There's so many examples of how fake news can be defined. But in addition to that, it's also used in political argumentation in more recent times as a way to delegitimize and dismiss something that you disagree with. So famously, Donald Trump had accused CNN of fake news. Okay, so it's a really, really clear way not just to apply to a range of activities or issues, but also to use it to delegitimize your opponent's claims. To this point in 2017, the official Collins Dictionary, it defined fake news as the word of the year, and its usage in the space of 1 year between 2016 and 2017, the word had increased in usage over 365%. So that is something that is very significant, for us to address in the social and the political sciences. So, for example, why is this happening? Why is this phenomenon occurring? And how can we, understand it and explore it more in order to address it? So in the context of fake news, this means that, misinformation and disinformation can thrive because people are more likely to accept narratives that align with their pre-existing views, even if those narratives are false. And that's very, very important in terms of, electoral influence, in terms for our framing and our agenda setting. And of course, you would have studied propaganda as well. So very important for the role of the media and the changing role of traditional news media and of course, social media as well. So this has really far-reaching implications for how we navigate our political, our social, and our cultural life. So everything from our our seemingly informal conversations with family and friends or in our schools to what we're hearing in the radio and in the news. Everything is impacted by this shift in the political landscape. So how do we go about defining misinformation and disinformation? The two words are a bit of a mouthful. And while the two terms are often used in place of one another, some people may refer to something as disinformation and misinformation in the same sense. It's really important for us to know that they are not synonyms, so they don't mean the same thing. Misinformation refers to inaccurate reporting that stems from inaccuracies themselves. So as such, the term does not imply an intent to deceive. However, disinformation, on the other hand, refers to the intentional spread of inaccurate information with a deliberate intent to deceive. So I think the key thing when you're considering what misinformation is versus disinformation is really about the intent that is underpinning the two. Okay, so we have the unintentional sharing of false or inaccurate information, or we have the deliberate sharing of false or inaccurate misinformation to mislead, create confusion, to convince people otherwise, and so on. So in that case, disinformation is definitely it's a form of misinformation. However, it is different because it depends on the intent, and that's why you might hear them used together, but also some commentators might use them without realizing that they mean the same. They do not mean the same thing. They mean very separate things. So in the context of our political and, media actors, um, you know, this may be exploited by spreading misleading or outright false information in order to manipulate public perception to meet a certain agenda. So in a post-truth era, facts become contested. Expertise in certain areas is devalued, and trust in traditional institutions. So, for example, the media and maybe health organizations. So, we saw that during COVID-19, trust in the government, trust in the media, and trust in health organizations is weakened. And that makes it much harder to challenge falsehoods and misinformation effectively. Because if there's trust that's undermined in these institutions, it's much easier to sow doubt and to sow fear and division as well, but also manipulate public perception into thinking a certain way that might benefit a certain group. So, just one thing to note as well is the importance of disinformation is not specifically to convince a group or the public or a person. It's not to convince them of a certain, falsity. It's actually just to sow doubt. And if propagators or perpetuators are successful in sowing doubt or sowing confusion, that is successful. Okay, because all you need really is a little bit of doubt to question, the truth, and that really does create a spiral, especially if you're on social media, because that's where you can kind of fall prey to certain social media algorithms, and we'll talk about that in a minute or two. But generally, we're seeing the impact of disinformation strategies in Irish society through the spread of misinformation. So, misinformation, it has undermined trust in institutions, and it does have the effect of polarizing communities if groups are being, if community organizations or local areas are being targeted specifically with disinformation campaigns. An example of that would be, anti-immigration protests that have been driven by misinformation. So, claims around, fears and threats, false and inaccurate claims by people in order to whip up, fear and panic and, sow confusion and doubt about, maybe minority groups. And, Aoife Gallagher has written a good bit around that with the Institute of Strategic Dialogue. And they use about several different case studies in recent years in the context of Ireland. And, what has happened, how it has spread, so how the information has been developed and crafted, the key actors involved in doing that, the claims that people have made. They trace, social media platforms, so maybe Telegram, Odyssey channels, and look at how false and inaccurate information is developed, maybe through memes or through gifts or through AI manipulated videos, and they circulated within certain groups, and look at how they can flood social media platforms, more mainstream social media platforms, with this to try and sway communities or individuals, one way or another to suit certain agendas. So moving, I suppose, on and specifically focusing on, for example, misinformation, like we said, that means errors that are made without an intent to deceive. Okay, so unintentional errors. In this case, we have two examples here. I know it's kind of hard to read, so I'm just going to, read them out. This is a headline from Dublin Live, and it's reporting on this famous hole in a beach that was mistaken as a meteor crater. So 2 years ago, I think, in 2023, a cosmic meteorite was reported on Portmarnock Beach, which turned out to be a hole dug by just a small group of local men during the sunny spell. There was a period of, nice weather, which is obviously a really big deal for Irish people. And everyone was out enjoying the sun, and these lads just decided they were going to have the crack and dug a hole. This hole seemed to garner a lot of attention, and it was mistaken for a meteorite crater, to the point that Virgin Media News visited the hole, and they reported on what they referred to as this out-of-the-world hole. So, the reporter said it's a huge, mysterious crater. Some people are hoping that what they're witnessing is a once-in-a-lifetime cosmic event. This was quite serious. It wasn't an April Fool's joke. And I think they even had people who were interested in astronomy that were giving their opinion on the meteor crater. So, it wasn't too long before this came out, and, the lads who had actually dug the hole came forward and said, oh no, we dug that. But it was very funny, but it's a really good example of how misinformation can be shared with absolutely no malintent. Okay, and another example could be last year, where thousands of people had engaged with a social media post and that was advertising this Halloween parade in Dublin. And a lot of people had believed that this was going to take place. However, it didn't. And a lot of people were left sorely disappointed when they turned up to Dublin for this parade that they then found out was non-existent. Once again, no deliberate intent to sow division or to polarize people. It was just something that people saw, maybe didn't think too much of, but said, oh, hey, look, we'll go out and do something and, have a nice night, watch the parade, and didn't think too much of it. But it does illustrate why it's very important for us to critically examine the sources that we see. And, it's not just a post on social media about a Halloween parade, but you can even see misinformation being spread in mainstream news media. It's perfectly understandable. People make mistakes, and there's no issue. But it's really important that we recognize that just because something is on news media, it doesn't make it necessarily true. And it's really important to go fact-checking and fact-finding for ourselves. So, moving to a more the disinformation side of things. So we looked at misinformation where there was no major intent to deceive. We're now looking at disinformation where there is very clear malintent to deceive. Now, keeping with the COVID-19 theme, we had on various different social media platforms the circulation of this film series that had framed itself as a documentary. And this came out, I think, in 2020, and it was underpinned by the notion that the COVID-19 pandemic was manufactured. So it was deliberately planned or fraudulent, and that people were being tricked. So this was a series of films. I think it was about a 3-part film series that started in the summer of 2020, and it rapidly spread through social media because essentially it leveraged that pre-existing cynicism or that mistrust in traditional institutions, so the government, health organizations, maybe academics in sciences and in healthcare, but also it did a really good job of further spreading confusion at a time where global attention was heightened on how to prevent the spread of coronavirus, how to treat it, how to prevent it on an individual basis by maybe changing or altering our behavior patterns. During that time, of course, people were understandably anxious and nervous and uncertain about the future, and during periods of time, during periods like this, at times like this, people are searching for answers. So in this case, misinformation about the origins of the virus and how to stop it, really warrant immediate attention for us, so we can protect public health, because claims were being made as part of this, not to wear masks, not to, get a vaccination, to ignore public health guidelines, and also to try and persuade other people to as well. So that would be an example, a really good example of maliciously crafted fake news with a very clear intent to deceive. So another example of malintent is the Ukraine war, false claims in 2022 about the war in Ukraine. So these were, it was framed as a hoax conflict. The Ukraine and Russia war has been unfolding in live time on social media. So we have been able to access information about it straight away. And, with the focus on trying to shift sympathy to particularly to Russia in the context of maybe shifting public perceptions or bringing, sympathy towards them, there was a series of false claims about crisis actors. So Ukrainian crisis actors to, delegitimize and, make people question exactly, how many victims there had been, to highlight that they were just, or to claim that they were just faking it. So in this case, we saw a video and a young man and a young woman having fake blood applied to their faces, and that racked up millions of views on multiple platforms. It was shared as supposed evidence that the war in Ukraine was a hoax and that civilian victims were actually crisis actors. So people who were hired specifically by the Ukrainian government to act out scenes from an attack. But the video was found shortly afterwards to be completely unrelated to the war. It was shot in 2020, so 2 years previously, on the production set of a Ukrainian TV series, Continent. So that the actors had come forward, they had highlighted this, and the male actor could be seen in behind-the-scene images from the set that were tweeted out, earlier in 2020. However, those claims had already happened. Okay, so that information had already been shared, it had already been spread, and it had spread across platforms like wildfire. And a lot of people started questioning, exactly how severe the conflict was and how many people in Ukraine had actually been impacted by this. So, of course, this was really, really important to, in terms of being addressed very quickly, because the focus on trying to shift public perception and raise kind of more sympathy for kind of the Russian military, for example, and kind of turn people against people in Ukraine, have very, very clear impacts and consequences, because public perception really is very important in terms of support during periods of conflict or conflict zones. So, however, it was already spread. The same as pandemic, this had already happened. So to look at how misinformation spreads, I think it's really, really important for us to be aware of that. So the dissemination, whether it's misinformation or disinformation, it tends to follow the following key stages. So if you think about the four of them: creation, amplification, reception, and propagation. So CARP, CARP. So creation refers to the false or misleading information that is either intentionally or unintentionally generated, because that's that blanket version of misinformation. Then it moves to amplification, where information is spread and shared through various channels, including social media. It could be picked up by traditional media and have inaccurate reporting, or word of mouth. And then we have reception. So, people come, across the misinformation, and, we tend to accept information that we receive as true, specifically if it aligns with our pre-existing beliefs. Okay, so we have cognitive biases towards, things that we believe. Okay, so if I'm receiving some information about something, that I'm already holding true, I'm much more likely to accept it rather than reject it or to question it. And that's really important in, for us to reflect and be aware of our own cognitive biases in terms of maybe receiving information. Yes, it may align with our beliefs or maybe our values. However, it may not be true. And then we move to propagation. So people who believe in the misinformation can further disseminate it within their networks, increasing its reach and potential impact. It's important to note as well that, people may share misinformation who do not necessarily believe it. They may disagree with it, they may be frustrated or angered by it, and they share it with the intent maybe to disprove it or to raise awareness to other people about it. However, that may sometimes actually have the opposite effect. Specifically, in the context of social media algorithms, because what that can actually do is that can actually heighten engagement and therefore heighten visibility on certain platforms. So just to talk about that, okay, so how social media algorithms contribute this, we hear talk of algorithms and echo chambers, but overall it can seem quite, complicated and, detached from, what we're talking about every day. But it's just to be aware that social media algorithms are specific sets of rules that are used by digital media platforms to determine the content that we see. Okay, so what am I seeing depending on my feed? Well, it's posts that are prioritized based on factors like relevance to me. Okay, and social media platforms determine what is relevant to me based on maybe other accounts that I've liked or other pages that I've liked, the nature of my engagement with posts. So either through watching certain videos for a very long period of time, liking posts, sharing posts, or commenting on them. So if there's a lot of focus that I'm giving to a very specific account or, a very specific type of videos, that can indicate to social media algorithms that I'm very interested in this, and they will show that more to me. So as I mentioned, you know, I have that on the kind of personal level of looking at what's relevant to me, but also on another basis, you might have posts that will get a very high amount of engagement, and they will show that to me as well, even though it might not exactly align with my preferences, simply because it is a viral post and it has gone absolutely viral. So there's there may be a high likelihood that it may appeal to me and that I might engage in it. So, you might have seen posts or, videos that might not be specifically in line or very relevant to, what you would be normally following or engaging with. However, you come across it because of the sheer volume of likes, shares, comments, and so on. So that's really, really important when we talk about disinformation, because disinformation campaigns are specifically framed and tailored towards inflammatory language and inflammatory content. So, very bold claims, very, outlandish claims that specifically increase, engagement, and as a result, make it more visible and make it more widely circulated. Okay, so you could often have, claims that really are polarizing, and it's sometimes just to annoy people or frustrate people to get them to engage in it, but also to increase circulation, because by your engagement with something, it is more likely to be shared to other people, through social media algorithms, because first of all, they show users similar content. So this is, for example, say I really love pictures of puppies, and on Instagram, I am following accounts that have, Labrador puppies and that might have terrier puppies and so on. It is much more likely, when you like something, you'll see a series of accounts pop up saying, relevant accounts. Okay. Or if you're on Facebook, for example, you might be shared, or something might appear on your news feed that may not be specifically relevant to you. However, it is coming up where there's a little question in blue saying, like this post, and it's wanting your feedback specifically on whether you like it or you don't like it, or you're just not interested. And there's also an option as well, if you really don't want to see something, is to look at the three ellipses, so the three little dots at the top of a post. Specifically, I'm thinking about Facebook at this in this context, to click those and to go into your settings on that post and highlight, I don't want to see this, and it gives you a series of options. So maybe it's not relevant to me, I dislike it, it is fake, X, Y, and Z. So that's really, really important if you really don't want to see something, or if you wanted a little bit more control in determining what crops up on your news feed. But that's where we have echo chambers, because if I am constantly looking through my different news feeds on my different social media platforms and looking at puppy related content, I'm more likely to kind of fall into a specific puppy focused vacuum. Okay, where I'm repeatedly exposed to puppy related content. I'm not going to lie, that sounds really great, actually. I love the idea of being repeatedly exposed to puppy related content, but it can, in the context maybe of more negative, harmful, kind of inaccurate information, it is basically consistently reinforcing your beliefs without any exposure to other perspectives that might question or challenge that, or might get you thinking critically about it as well. Okay, so a very simple way to explain the algorithm is that image there on the left. So for social media, all digital media platforms, did the user engage with the post? You have yes, you have no. Okay, so you show similar posts or you show different posts, and it goes on and on in a continuous cycle. Okay, so how do we deal with this? I mean, here are just some questions to ask when you're engaging with content on social media platforms. So the post or the video or the meme, or maybe just the text based post, does it cite facts, and does it link it to original content? So for example, if I'm seeing a claim on X in relation to the war in Ukraine as a hoax conflict, where are the facts? Where are the figures? Are those facts from reliable and valid sources themselves? Is it linked to original content? And in the next slide, we're going to look at how, or some of the ways that you can determine what is original content, or distinguish between fabricated or manipulated content. So there are ways to do that, but it does involve taking ownership and accountability over the media that you consume. And if you are very uncertain about something, or if it's kind of giving you some of those telltale signs, that you follow it up and you see further about it. So for example, say I'm making a claim in relation to, I don't know, housing in Ireland. One of the important things, or I'm engaging with a claim that's been made on social media, the first thing that I would want to do is, in looking up the Department of Housing and the figures, or Central Statistics Office and the figures, or if it's referring to an organization. So for example, Focus Ireland, Peter McVerry Trust, I will want to follow up with those organizations and see, did they make those claims, or are those facts real? So another question to ask is either the platform or is the account visibly one-sided? So if I'm following an account that says, we love puppies, we hate kittens, a really very clear example there, would indicate to me that the content that I'm going to be receiving is biased against kittens and towards puppies. So that will give me a really good idea as to whether the content that I'm going to be consuming and reading is going to be focusing and biased towards one side or the other. So if it's telling me that kittens, are, planning to take over the world, that really should be a bit of a telltale sign for me to question it. So, I don't know how I started talking about cats, kittens and puppies, but I did. So the other one is the headline factual or clickbait. So one example of that would be, sensationalist framing. Okay, so is there inflammatory language being used? Is it offensive? Is it dehumanizing language? Is the language very insulting? Or are there outrageous claims being made just specifically in order for you to click into it? Something like "you will never believe," or sometimes maybe in all capital letters in order to really kind of pull people in, kind of really, I suppose, draw on people's frustrations and kind of harvest in a way people's outrage and anger over maybe a certain issue. Another thing then to do is to look towards the author. So we talked about authorship. Is it a journalist who has written this? Like maybe a freelance journalist, or is it a person who is claiming to be a journalist, or is it an actual journalist? So when I say an actual journalist, could be a person who's freelance or a person who has worked in the industry or might be actually aligned with either one or a couple of different newspapers or news media outlets. So one of the ways to do that would be to check their online presence. So previously, now I know a lot of people have moved from X to Blue Sky, but to check people's X profile, because they might have it linked specifically to, I don't know, the Irish Times or the Irish Independent or the Irish Examiner and so on. Another thing to do is check their LinkedIn account. Because that is much more likely giving you an indication of maybe some of their background work. Or even just to Google them, their name and name a few different news media outlets to see if they've written previous articles. Another one, and this is kind of harder to decipher, is the article taken from another website and has it been altered? So we looked at, for example, Ukraine as a hoax conflict. That was a video that was extracted from a different context. And it was put into a different context with claims made about it. So that can be kind of harder to distinguish, but there are still ways to do that. And like I said, we're just going to look at the practical tools before we finish up. And lastly, what kind of platform is it on? Okay, so is it on X or TikTok or Telegram? These platforms particularly, they are especially prone to mis and disinformation, as there are less regulations regarding, the regulation of false, inaccurate, or fabricated content, because there's a certain level of accountability or responsibility that social media companies have taken on. But as we know, maybe some of the debates that you're engaging in your classes or can be around, transparency and, responsibility of the media. And I think probably I've left out Facebook, and I should be adding Facebook to that list, because Facebook has recently announced that they are not going to be engaging in fact checking. So that's really, really important to be aware of, I think, in the current, political climate, to keep an eye out for, announcements by social media companies to say, like, oh, we're no longer engaging in this. That's really, really important because those are positions, those are jobs that were previously occupied within Facebook for people specifically to check content. Okay, so that has wide-ranging implications, specifically, for example, during elections, during referendum campaigns. Ireland has actually became a driver internationally in targeting false advertising and false claims surrounding elections, and particularly during referenda around 2018 and particularly with the repeal of the Eighth Amendment, you had the Transparent Referendum Initiative, and that was designed and developed by civil society organizations in line with journalists to counter claims that were being made by various different groups and organizations, but also to highlight, foreign ads that had been paid for to kind of flood social media spaces to maybe spread misinformation about the referendum in order to kind of encourage voters to vote one way or the other. So that's really, really important for us to be aware of as well. So that power, of fact checking for social media organizations and for companies, and to just be very aware, like, depending on what platform you're on, something could be, downvoted, or something could be, flagged on, for example, maybe Instagram, but you will receive the same post and the same claim on Facebook, and it will be unaltered. There will be no kind of context provided or reference, and just entirely depends now on the platform that you're on. So just to be aware of that, practically. So then we have some practical tools. So just here are some links, names of some links. So fact check tools for written content. Fact.check.org are fantastic. Media bias fact check are brilliant. Routers are really, really great for like international news. So, they're doing a lot of stuff around Israel and Palestine, around Ukraine and Russia, or just general, international events that have been unfolding. So great for foreign affairs. The Associated Press Fact Check is an independent fact-checking organization. They do some really, really great work. Claim Review as well, the Claim Review Project. So these are people who put a lot of time and energy into specifically fact-checking and addressing these things. So it's really important that we're aware of those tools as well, but also that you're sharing them with other people that maybe might be prone or might have fallen down, I suppose, fallen prey to some misinformation. And it's not just fact checking, claims. We also have fact check tools for images. So I know there's a lot of concern around AI manipulation and AI fabrication of, video footage and images. And that is something that's definitely happening. And it can be more persuasive and more compelling for people, because it's becoming harder to differentiate from non-AI manipulated footage. However, there are, of course, telltale signs. So, for example, like the fact that hands are still, looking very, very weird and odd in AI generated imagery. It still can't, grasp how hands, work. But in terms of, for example, the claims about Ukrainian, crisis actors, if you see images like that, they can actually be quite easily addressed by doing a reverse search through Google Image. Okay, so if you take an image and you put it into Google, if there's a website or an article or a post on social media making a claim and using an image, you can put that through Google Image and check to see if that's been used anywhere else. You then have reverse eye extension. So that's really, really good as well. Like, you can put that through and that can tell you whether this, the image is, has been used in another context. And then we also have fact check tools for video content. So We Verify is a browser extension. It's really, really brilliant. You can put in basically the hyperlink to the content and it will tell you whether it has been AI manipulated. And so that would be really important for deepfakes, for example. And then we have YouTube Data Viewer. Again, this was part of a project of Amnesty International UK for enhanced transparency and media accountability. And it's another good way to check to see if videos are fabricated or manipulated. And then lastly, bots. For anyone who's on X, bots are a dime a dozen on X. So often, there was some really good research recently by Aoife Gallagher, again, the Institute of Strategic Dialogue, that found, a lot of posts that had seemingly gone viral in Ireland had actually, the majority, by tracing their IP addresses, so tracing basically the address of where people's activity was located. A lot of it actually had come from the US, or a lot of it had come from the UK, or from external influences. So if you're on X and you see a post really blowing up and it's in an Irish context and it's making some wild claims or false claims and accusations, um, they basically went through all of the accounts that were sharing and commenting, and a huge portion of them were bots, but also a lot of them came from foreign accounts. So they were most likely that were bots set up by accounts that were not based in Ireland. So I think that's really important to bear in mind, because that can really, I think a lot of people have said to me, it made them, upset to see posts that could be so insulting or inflammatory being shared so widely. But that often actually is quite a hollow perception, and that's not fully the case. Okay, so that is a way to generate and increase engagement to heighten visibility of that post, okay, and make it seem more inflated and more popular than it really is in fact. So if you want to check out if a certain account is a bot, a really good way to do that is just to stick the handle or the HTTP link into Botometer, and that will show you whether or not. And that's also a project of the university as well. So yeah, look, as as certain tools, as information, I suppose, is more, there's more, AI manipulation in terms of media, images, and disinformation strategies are becoming increasingly more complicated and complex. We also have a lot of practical tools at our dispense to use to challenge those, to counter those, to fact check and verify those claims. So it's just really important that we're aware of them and we know how to use them, and we show them to other people as well. So that's it for me. I'm going to wrap up now, but we do a lot of we do a lot of work around fake news and misinformation at Carlow College, and there are students that we have that would be engaging in this area. So if you're interested in hearing more about this, if you're interested in studying politics and society at at higher level for in college, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Or if you're interested, you might think it might be a good idea to do a workshop in your school, we're more than happy to come out and have a chat with you around a topic maybe that you're interested in. So yeah, you can get in touch with us through either our marketing department, and always feel free to contact me individually as well. I would absolutely love to hear from you. So thank you very much for taking the time to watch this, and it has been an absolute pleasure. And like I said, engaging with misinformation and disinformation is, it's really more important than ever, but it's also really excellent, in terms of politics and society, which is a really important subject in relation to, addressing how this might impact political and cultural life, how it impacts us as citizens, but also, the implications it has for wider democracy and democratic institutions. So that I will let you go. Thank you again, and it was lovely to be able to present to you today.